This hair today is giving very much Lydia Dietz. And I'm here for it. So we're back. And we have bangs. If you don't like them, please do not let me know because I will cry about it. So this is my first ever monthly wrap-up. Ooh. Honestly, I actually debated even starting monthly wrap-ups because here's the thing. I honestly don't think anyone should actually pay attention to how I rate books because I rate books solely based off the vibe. Like solely based off the feelings that I do or do not get while I'm reading. Unless there's an aspect of the book that is so overtly bad that I cannot ignore it, which we do have one of those, we'll get there. But unless there's something that's so bad about it that I cannot look past it, we move simply off vibes. My ratings are for me and me only. So I read 9 books, I think, this month. 10. We read 10 books. Now I would say 10 is pretty average for me. Props to the girlies that are reading 20 books a month. I wish I could do that, but I would say my average is more so between 6 and 12 books a month. This is also the first year I've ever set a yearly reading goal, and I simply have no idea how many books I can read in a year because I've never paid attention to it before. So I set my goal as 100. Will we make it? We'll see in December. So the first book I read this month was The Stolen Heir by Holly Black. Do I remember anything about this book? Do I remember anything about this book? No, I do not. Don't ask me about the plot. Don't ask me what happens because I simply could not tell you. However, I rated this a 4. Now, I gave this a 4 because I just love Holly Black's writing. I love the way that she writes fantasy. I love the way that she writes fairies. It feels so whimsical. It feels so nostalgic. It feels like I could go outside in my backyard and find a fairy. And I love that. Like her books always just feel so nostalgic to me. And for the longest time, I did not know why. But then I realized she quite literally co-wrote the Spiderwick Chronicles. Like, am I the only one that did not know that? I do wish that I had reread the other 3 books because the events of those books are mentioned quite a bit in this one. And every time they were brought up, I was kind of just like, what are we talking about? But yeah, Holly Black is just one of my favorite writers, so I'm gonna rate her books high. Because like I said, vibes. So next I read Woom by Duncan Ralston. This was the lowest rated book on my Goodreads TBR, so I read it for my Goodreads highest and lowest video. I still think about this book every single day. This is about a man named Angel. He goes back to a motel room where right off the bat we figure out his mother died there. He orders a plus-size sex worker, and once she gets there, he starts to tell her all of these stories. And at first you don't know the significance of them. They're all just about different people, but all we know is that they've all taken place in the exact motel room that they're in. You know, eventually we find out the significance of the stories, how they're all connected. There's a plot twist. I don't think there is anything that will ever prepare you for what happens at the end of this book. Now, this is extreme horror. It is meant to shock you. It is meant to absolutely repulse you. It is meant to be completely off-putting. I said in my video in which I read this that I wish I could take a wire brush that you use to clean a grill and scrub my brain to forget these things. Now, I didn't originally write this because I was just in shock, but now that I'm able to look past all of, you know, the shocking, gory, graphic things that happen in this book and look solely at the plot, I think I would give this a 3.75, which for this genre, I feel like that's a great rating considering all of the pain that you also have to go through when you read books like these. So overall, not bad. So next, I technically read The Serpent and the Wings of Night, but I'm gonna save all those books for the end so I can talk about them all together. So next, we're gonna talk about Gone Girl. I rated this book a good old 5 stars. I live for this book. I really like Gillian Flynn as an author. I read both Sharp Objects and Dark Places last summer, and for some reason I didn't want to read this one. But I finally decided to read it, and I'm so glad that I did because it is easily now one of my favorite books. Of course, I've seen the movie so many times, and the movie is great on its own, but I think it goes without saying that the book is always going to be better. Like, not only do you just get so much more out of the book, there are also like so many details from the movie that you wouldn't necessarily pick up on unless you read the book. Like in the movie, Nick is an idiot. And in the book, he's still an idiot, but you get more of an understanding as to why. He's a more nuanced idiot in the book. Of course, Amy is like the blueprint. She is the OG unhinged girl boss, and she was simply just too smart for her husband. However, that being said, I feel like nobody talks about just how toxic Nick also is. Like, Amy is a certified psychopath. We know that, but Nick is also toxic. Like, they're toxic together, and you realize at the end that they're just they're just meant to be. Next, I read The Butterfly Garden by Hutchinson, and I gave this a 3.5, 3.75. So this is about a man who kidnaps young women, and he takes them and keeps them in this big garden greenhouse complex type thing. And once he has them in there, he tattoos realistic butterfly wings on their backs. Hence the name The Butterfly Garden. So the story is told after the fact of the garden being found, some of the girls being rescued, and we're getting the story relayed to us through FBI interviews with one of the girls. Now, I gave this around a 3.75 because I like thrillers and I like mystery because it keeps you guessing. You don't necessarily know what's going to happen at the end. So the ending of this one is a little bit anticlimactic just because you do know how it ends. And I would say almost that this is very like character driven. Of course there's a story, there's a plot line, but I would say it's much more focused on the relationships between the girls in the garden, because there will be 20, 25 girls in the garden at a time, and they form this bond, they form this sisterhood, they do what they can to survive, to keep each other alive, and that part of the story is beautiful because it's very much about like sisterhood and these bonds that these girls have. So I didn't dislike it by any means, but I just like my thrillers, my mysteries a little bit more exciting. Next, I read The Devil All the Time by Donald Ray Pollock, and let me tell you, this book ate. So this is also a movie on Netflix, and I watched that movie right when it first came out, not knowing that it was based on a book. And I liked it, I vibed with it, moved on with my life. However, this past month, I decided to watch the movie again, but I was like, wait, you should just read the book. So I did, and I'm so happy that I did because I loved this book. I gave this a 4.5, 4.75. This was almost 5 stars for me. I don't know, it's about an ensemble of characters. It takes place in small town, backwoods, Ohio, and West Virginia. And I know how that sounds. You're like, that sounds awful. But like, there is just a certain vibe, a certain aesthetic to this book that I just love. I love me a good southern backwoods mystery thriller. And I think the movie helps with that so much. Like when movies are done well, like when movies based on books are done well, they literally add so much to the book. Like with this and Gone Girl, I don't know if I would have been so into the books if I hadn't already seen the movie and enjoyed the movie. For The Devil All the Time, that movie is done so well. It's cast so perfectly. Like Tom Holland as Arvin, it was genius. And him kicking shut that car door. Also, this book gives very much Ethel Cain, Preacher's Daughter. I am in my Ethel Cain era, and it's a permanent era. We're not leaving, we're here to stay. But Preacher's Daughter was made to accompany this book. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, please go find out because it's amazing. Next, I read Haunting Adeline by H.D. Carlton, and I just posted a full reading vlog of this. So if you want a more in-depth reaction, you should go watch that, but I gave this 1 star. This was my first introduction to dark romance, and I was so ready to like this book. It's darker, I like dark books, there's a spooky vibe, but I simply just liked this so much. Stalker plotline aside, like the fact that the non-consensual relationship between a girl and the man who is stalking her is not even my issue with this book. It was the narration and the dialogue for me. Like, the writing almost felt, like, very immature. I don't know. You know, it was very, like, Wattpad fanfiction-y. Like I said in my video, you know that, like, stereotypical main character Wattpad narration? You know how they use the word orbs for eyes? That happens in this book. I don't know. It just felt like fan fiction or something that I could have written when I was, like, 13. Or something I would have enjoyed at 13. Also, there's really like no romance involved at all. I feel like this is falsely labeled a dark romance. Like this is closer to fantasy for me than anything. This just was not for me. Next, I have the Crowns of Neoxia duology along with the novella Listen. I know everybody read these books this month, and that's because they're enjoyable. Okay, they're good. I read these spread out throughout the month, but I'm going to talk about them all together now, and I'm going to rate them collectively. I think I enjoyed the first one the most. The novella was okay to me, and I liked the last one, but I think I liked the first better. I think that would average out to about a 4. I'm not actually doing math. That's just what feels right. I love fantasy. Fantasy is my favorite genre, and I just love new worlds and being able to immerse myself in a completely different place because I read to escape real life. This was short, it was sweet. The duology is focused on Rain and Araya. The novella you should read in between, it's focused on 2 other characters, but they pop up in the last one. I just found it enjoyable. Like, it wasn't revolutionary to me, but I still enjoyed it. We've got a badass female main character, we've got vampires, we've got angry gods and goddesses, goddesses. There's a whole lot. Now, I do prefer my fantasies to be a little bit more magical, a little bit more fairy tale. Like, I would say that's probably my favorite. And this still has magic in it, but I would say it's definitely more focused on like action and politics rather than magic, a magical world, magical elements. But I still enjoyed it nonetheless. Lastly, I read The Housemaid by Freida McFadden. I saw so many people raving about this book, about Freida McFadden in general. This was my first book of hers. This is about a woman who gets hired to work for this family. The wife seems a little bit evil, seems a little bit off. She makes messes, she tells lies. She starts falling for the husband, and then it goes from there. The ending of this book saved it for me. You know, the first half, I did not really know how to feel. And the first half, I was really not into it. Like, I thought Millie, the main character, the housemaid, she was kind of stupid. Like, she didn't know the difference between Spanish and Italian. And I was also thinking in my head, if I were Millie, if I were the main character, this book would have been 20 pages because I would have thrown hands with Miss Nina Winchester when she started acting like that towards me. Like, I would have swung on her and got sent back to jail. But of course, you get to the plot twist, you get to the ending of the book, everything is explained, and I really liked the ending. So I think overall, I'd rate this a 3.75, around a 4. It wasn't necessarily like nothing I've ever read before. Like, if you've read The Last Mrs. Parrish by Liv Constantine, it has a very similar plot twist to that. Like, the very end of the book, I did like. But I am glad that I ended up enjoying this because it was not looking good at first. And I know she has a couple other books that I've seen people talk about, so I'll probably read more of those too. So those were all the 10 books that I read this month. Like I said, don't pay too much attention to the way that I rate books because we're not operating off of a system around here, okay? So if you really liked the book and I rated it lower than you did, please do not take offense because I'm solely moving off the fact of whether or not it made my brain feel good. So I hope you enjoyed. I hope you had a good time with me. I hope you decide to stick around, and I'll see you in the next one.